Right, I'm delighted to be back here with Jonathan Welbon. Jonathan, we were talking a little about yourself, your background. Okay. You had been an athlete. You'd said you didn't make it to the upper echelons. You were then asked you were then asked to coach aspiring athletes, and you worked with them.
Yes.
Sounds like you took quite a scientific approach. Some of those people later went on to perform, including at the Olympics, and we're on the edge of the London Olympics now. You were telling us a little bit about your approach to coaching. Tell us a little bit more about that, because how you approached it, and also there is this issue about how do you get the best out of people, and have you got any particular observations of why it seems that you were touching on, for example, in some areas like cycling, we've done very, very well, but there are other areas where we haven't quite performed, or we have done well in the past, and we're not doing so well now. Tell us a little bit more.
All sports have strengths and weaknesses, and some of the how I've learnt over the last 15 years of coaching is that you can't approach things in a very scripted way.
Yeah.
Every athlete that presents themselves to me, I have a model in my head of what I want to get out of that person, but that person doesn't fit that model. Okay, and I'm not trying to force that person into a model, but there are certain good practice elements working with that person which will enable them to achieve. And it doesn't matter whether it's someone who is never going to be an elite athlete. To me, it doesn't matter. In fact, some of the most challenging and interesting people to work with are those people who I've got to get the best out of them. Now, as I said, I have a model in it, and that's over many years' experience of working with them.
And can I touch on that bit there, because I think it's really important. We were chatting earlier on, and there were a number of people who were just on the track there, and you were pointing out extraordinary things to me about posture, about the body shape, and what kind of sports that they were best fit, and so on. That you could tell just by looking at people. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And I remember once you were talking a little bit about that adjustment. So tell me a little bit about this model that you have in your head, and where does all of that knowledge come from?
A lot of that knowledge comes from experience gained either through working on the track, working with individuals, working with physiotherapists as well, and people with experience, undertaking my own training. But I can perhaps look at someone and assess what they might be capable of. Yeah. It isn't until you start working with them you actually may realise that they are able to do that or should be doing something else. But I can see if a young person comes to me and I can see them walking towards me, and I can see the way they walk is indicative of some of the difficulties they will have out running, then I will try and change the way they walk.
Right.
Try and change the way they have locomotion, if that's
got you. So there are some things that you can spot initially in terms of how somebody's holding themselves, carrying themselves, their posture, and things that they're doing right and doing wrong. And you were also pointing out earlier in terms of some young athletes, things like which muscles they've been working on or whatever, and all those the things that need to be.
A lot of young people overwork muscles, particularly. If they come from a rugby background, they'll try to push lots of weights. If they come from a weight training background, they will do it sometimes incorrectly because they haven't been coached correctly. And just generally looking at the way the person moves, because their biomechanics are predetermined by genetics. So you've got to work on these things, and just basically going back to the way the person moves and the event that they're working towards achieving. You've got to mould them or chain them or split them down, if you like, into the relevant elements, so that you can build on that.
And I'd imagine that, Jonathan, this is a huge task because you've got so many factors here. You have got that individual, as you said, walking towards you, and perhaps very often I'd imagine that you'll be starting with those people. They might be very, 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 very young, or they might be a more, somebody who's a teenager or more mature. But you've got you've got the physical aspects, and then you've got the personality, and you've got the mental aspects and the motivational aspects. So you've got a huge range of things to address there. How do you begin to do that, to go on that journey from that person that you've spotted. You've looked at them, you've spotted them, you've perhaps identified where they may well be good, perhaps they might be aware of that already.
Yes, right.
How do you then mold that person into the best athlete that they can possibly be, especially if there's work to be done both physically and in terms of their mentality or their habits?
So, sometimes the mental side is far more difficult to deal with than actually the physical side.
Right.
I can work with someone, do all the work that's necessary, but they won't put the work in. And that comes down to their mental, I call it paradigm.
Yeah.
They feel that they can be very, very talented and they can get by not doing the work because they're very talented. And then there's a point at which they get to the stage where they become disillusioned because either injury sets in because they haven't done the work, or they have got a particular need to step up to the plate at that stage, because all of their contemporaries will be doing the same work and in a much more committed way.
So there's a huge, and also what you indicate, there's a huge pressure there, isn't it? And I guess there's what that person wants, what they want, what's expected of them, how far they're wanting to go in this particular sport, their own, how hard they're prepared to work, and so on. So, so once you've addressed that thing about how much they're prepared to put into it, walk me through if there ever is a typical way or blend of ways that you'll be working with that athlete. You had indicated to me earlier that there are a number of different facets and aspects when you're working with somebody, and you might be looking to put together a team to help that person.
Okay, the key to this is that you also must have age-specific training. Okay, I wouldn't sort of put a program together necessarily for a young person from the age of 10 up to 15. I'd work around getting them enjoying themselves. There's no two ways about that. But once you start to put in the work at 15, you do need to really start to program and get in depth the needs that they have, to basically their needs, to try and juggle those needs that they have, whether it be social needs or whether it be athletics needs or whether it be educational needs, along with the program that you set, because ultimately the program to become an elite athlete is rigorous, tough, requires a great deal of mental dedication, means sacrifice.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit on that, because I would imagine that there's so many facets to this. I guess one of the first issues is how do you find and spot that young talent anyway? Presumably there's an issue here that we're lucky where we are here is an amazing kind of sports facility. I guess one of the first issues is that you're wanting to get young people into playing sport and having the opportunity to play sport and having the opportunity to try their hand at a range of different things in the first place. And then there's that whole journey of expectations and linking that with their educational development and so on. Can you just walk us through a little bit about some of those factors? So if somebody, let's say, is watching this and perhaps they've got a youngster who they think has got some sporting ability and so on, can you just walk us through some of those steps and how we should be spotting that talent in the first place, and then I'm picking up on that?
Spotting talent is perhaps a slightly over-egged mixture, but what we're talking about here is if there's a child showing an interest, or a senior athlete showing an interest, they will sometimes bring themselves down to the track, sometimes brought with parents. The first thing you do is,
so they might literally, sometimes they might just show up. Sometimes that happens.
You must make them feel comfortable in the environment they're in. Because if you don't, you'll never see them again.
Right.
Talking to them, just getting them involved, is part and parcel of the deal.
Got you.
Okay. But as they become more involved, they become more motivated, and it's then up to the coach to guide that motivation and to shape that motivation in the most appropriate way. And so, if the young person, and 15 and 16 is actually quite a difficult age, starts to go, if you like, call it, go off slightly off the rails, you have to allow them to do that.
Right.
Because they've got exams to do. They're learning how to deal with boys and girls. They're sort of going out with girlfriends, boyfriends, and to try and keep them focused on something when you have to get up on a Saturday morning to drive a long distance to run around a muddy field or a cold, wet track, and it's actually really, really difficult to do that. but you've just got to keep plugging away, focusing them on the longer term objective.
And I wonder if it's one of the issues here. You were telling me a little bit about how the different levels of sport and sports coaching works. That I would imagine that when you're working at the club level or initial level, the whole range of the different kind of interventions and supports may not necessarily be extensive. I guess our elite athletes may have access to a whole range of all the different kind of therapists and the different types of coaches, psychologists, life coaches, or whoever it might well be.
But with the general club athlete, we do try to provide some of those areas there. Often the coach is that person.
Is all of those things rolled into one?
Those things rolled into one. Motivation coach, psychologist, someone who deals with their tries to put them to a physiotherapist that's local, or a massage therapist. We do have massage therapists here. But all of these skills I've acquired over the years, and we also have to address our own skill needs as well as coaches. Now, when they get to a certain standard, and it's usually when they're getting to become county class and above, you really have to start to take it seriously as to what you do to bring these people in. And so when they get to certain levels, and generally they are winning major races, if they come to the attention of the athletics authorities, they tend to get that support. And so many of the athletics clubs people here go on to universities which are oriented towards, in this case, athletics. And so they'll go to Loughborough or locally down the road to St Mary's, where they get support from coaches who do weight training, get support from people who are physiotherapists. So that is part of the package. If they then start to performing at national level, then often they can be tapped into UK athletics funding, national and international level, if they have the capability of doing that.
Got you. And I'm curious to know, can you tell very often when you're working with somebody, you've talked a lot about all those different aspects there, from first of all making somebody feel welcome, giving them an opportunity, getting them enthused, engaged, being mindful about all those different levels of their particular kind of development. Can you tell, and have you been able to tell, for example, you've had cases of you telling me of a particular athlete who went on to perform at the Olympics, all of our attention is now turning on that. Can you typically tell with somebody that when you've got something very, a real special talent on your hands?
Sometimes. And there are instances where you can't tell. And I'm thinking of one individual who now runs for Great Britain, but where we originally started doing the 1,500 metres, 800 metres, he just wasn't that capable. But over the years, he's gradually extended the distance. He's now actually competing for Great Britain over 50 miles and 50k.
Wow.
But he's very strong. Now he's worked really hard to do that. On the other hand, though, we have had instances where one individual who was extremely quick over the 400, and over the 200, and over the 800. It was obvious from the start that he's got potential talent. And
what level of talent? What kind of level did you think at that point? What do you think? Olympic level?
To get to Olympic level, you have to have consistency of approach. But certainly it's national and international level. If you got the focus. And unfortunately, he was done down by injury. Unfortunately, but there were others where you're sort of between the two. I had a couple of twins locally. I worked with Andrew and Alan Graffin for many years. Their dad said to them they loved football. He said, "You'll never make a footballer. I love you to death. I love football to death, but the two of you won't meet." He said, "You're very good at running. Go and do some running." And they actually became internationals. And one of them went to the Olympic Games at Sydney.
Oh, wow.
Over the 1,500 metres. Not, I hasten to add, with me, but with Tim Hutchins. But where Mike and we got them to the level of, international level at junior and at senior, and then he went on to become... Now, that area, you can say, there is an element there, but we've got an awful lot of work to do to get them to the level.
Got you. And when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the things that you've done most recently is working with chief executives who have got to manage different kind of teams, different kind of challenges.
Are different.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a little bit when we come back a little bit about that, and perhaps what we can learn and apply in business and organisations that we learn to sport, and also it'd be interesting also to find about if there are any other lessons of the things that you think that we should be or could be doing more to engage also young people or learn more in terms of, or even for our athletes, any areas in terms of support that you think are necessary. So we'll come back in just a moment.